Welcome back to Overtime here on WOTM. You know, Mark, June 1 is the time every year where you think you might see a big move. It's normally whenever the big contracts get moved. And Julio Jones has been part of trade talks for a very, very long time now. And he kind of inserted himself into it when they were doing that show, The Undisputed, when Shannon Sharp and he had a conversation. Right. And then over the air came out and said that he's out of there. So it felt like a matter of time, but it was going to be who was going to be the one that picked up that big contract, and what would they send over? What would Atlanta say yes to? We found out our answer over the weekend as Julio Jones officially traded to the Tennessee Titans. We'll get some future draft picks. Atlanta didn't get that first rounder that they wanted, but Tennessee is still getting one of the top players in the league. Let's talk about this from two aspects. Number one, what does this do for the Tennessee offense now, and Tennessee in general? Do you put them at the top of the AFC now with a great running game with Derrick Henry, and then two beasts in A.J. Brown and Julio Jones there on the outside as far as your receivers go?
Yeah, well, I think for the Alabama faithful, you get to see two guys that didn't necessarily play together in college, but are going to make up a pretty good offensive side of the ball here in Tennessee. I think Ryan Tannehill, with how he's proven himself in Tennessee, was a guy who really couldn't stay healthy with the Dolphins. But then also a lot of those times when he was healthy with Miami, wouldn't play as consistent down the stretch in the regular season.
Right.
He has in Tennessee, which I think surprised some people, he was able to take over the job. And if you saw in the offseason, they lost Corey Davis, they lost Janu Smith, so they needed to replace that production. You were talking about guys that had 65 catches, 41 catches, and 13 touchdowns between them. So I think Jones is a guy, no doubt, that does that. But here's the interesting thing. All month, on any show I've been on, I was on the show Loudmouth back up in New York the other night. Right. And they're asking me, first of all, they give me a whole bunch of stuff about, oh, he's from Alabama, all this stuff that I'm like, whatever. It gets me annoyed. But nobody thought he was going to Tennessee. Yeah. Nobody mentioned Tennessee. Right. It was him and Aaron Rodgers. It was, what about Seattle? Seattle, what about maybe New Baltimore? England. Yeah, New England. Tennessee? No. People kind of forget about Tennessee. Right. You remember 2 years ago, they actually won games in the playoffs where Tannehill didn't throw for 100 yards. That's right, yeah. They won back-to-back games where Tannehill threw for 100 yards. The only other time that happened in NFL playoff history was when the Steelers quarterback Terry Bradshaw did it in the 73 divisional round in the 73 championship game. Right. So it's been a long time. How I knew that is because I was on radio when we did it. I don't know those things off the top of my head, but I think that back then people thought that they were going to give Kansas City a run for their money in that championship game because of the power running game that Derrick Henry brings. Right. When you bring that kind of physicality to an offense, and then you add the physicality that Jones does as a wide receiver. Like we had said before, there are guys that make big plays in big games. Then there are wide receivers who are good wide receivers, but they get a little alligator arms. Right. Jones isn't one of those guys. And Tannehill, I think now has a little more confidence because even some of the other guys, not taking nothing away from Corey Davis and Junior Smith, I think there's a little bit different when you have a Pro Bowler out there that's had 1,000-yard season after 1,000-yard season, performed in the Super Bowl, and adding him to A.J. Brown, one of the elite athletes who looks like a Greek god, I think really is going to help Tennessee, and they all of a sudden become a player in the AFC.
Speaking of that, one of the things that in the AFC everybody gets compared to is, of course, Mahomes and the Chiefs. In your opinion, does this put Tennessee on that level, in that category? Do you need to see more? And on the backside of that, how much does this hurt Atlanta, or do you think Atlanta will be fine overall?
Well, I don't know about Atlanta. Yeah. I think that if Atlanta drafted, the tight end, if Kyle Pitts out of Florida, I thought that that's what was going to be the plan, is they were going to give one more shot at having an elite offense. Yeah. And like we said, Atlanta kind of has shown that they fall asleep for a couple of years and they'll come back and they'll make a strong run at it. You made it to the championship game 2011, made it to Super Bowl 2016. And they kind of take a couple of years off, and maybe this was the year that they would come back now. So I don't know what they're going to, what it means for Atlanta. Right. I don't think it means that they can compete. Right. I certainly don't think it makes them better. And for the AFC, I think you have Kansas City, you have Buffalo, you have Baltimore right off the bat as teams that are probably the best and looking at Super Bowl favorites. Don't forget about Pittsburgh, who went undefeated for most of the season, opening up last year, and still got Roethlisberger, and they got Najee Harris to now run the ball. They didn't really run the ball well, but their offensive line ability to protect Roethlisberger is really the bigger thing for them. Then you have a Dolphin team that's going to be better, and a Patriot team that is reloaded.
Exactly.
So it's not just the Chiefs for me. The Chiefs are probably the favorite, but you got some teams that, or some writers out there, they're saying maybe Kansas City won't even make the playoffs when you look at the development of the Chargers and their young quarterback, and then you look at the Raiders, and they're going to now be in a stadium with a bunch of lunatics there for every game, because Raider fans are all lunatics.
Oh, yeah.
And what will that make the Raiders? You know, maybe Raider Nation will come back, and then, you know, they'll have a good season like they used to back in the Al Davis from guys who never expected it, because Raiders are always where kind of cast-offs go to reclaim their careers. And I think that you never know what to expect, especially in the AFC West. So I think while Kansas City is still the favorite, Mahomes has made the playoffs back-to-back, you know, made Super Bowl back-to-back years. Not too many teams make it 3 straight years. Patriots did. You know, I know the Dolphins did back in the early 70s, and the Bills did in the 90s. They made it 4 straight times, but that usually doesn't happen that much. So we'll see. I think the odds are against them, especially dealing with all the other teams that are going to have something to play for now in the AFC.
Exactly. I think so too. And I think it'll be interesting to see how this offense kind of stacks up against some of the best in that conference. We'll see how it all shakes out with Julio now in Nashville. Well, coming up next here on Overtime, we will close up shop on our program. Be sure to join us.